Guys, iKailaKai here, and the title is not clickbait. Bandai has revealed a card at the recent Tokyo Championship that's going to change the game, perhaps forever. Despite OP10 coming out only a little bit over a week ago, we're already getting news about EB02 that's coming out in about a month and a half. This set is going to, probably similar to EB01, help bring some old decks up to speed with some of the newer decks. EB01 was extremely successful in doing this, so I'm very excited for this set. But let's take a look at this card. Gets to look at top 4 cards of your deck and put any 4-cost or higher card to your hand. The trigger also activates the main effect. Green has always had a problem where all of their top end were completely different types. You'd have Nine Shanks in Film, you'd have Hody Jones in Fishmen Pirates, of Flamingo in Don Quixote Pirates, you have 8-cost Kid in Supernovas. Everything was a mess in that deck, and if you wanted to have any sort of consistency, you just needed to max out the counts of these, being able to search any of them, and also being able to search things like Cavendish, 5-cost Smoker in OP10, is just really huge. This card adds consistency to the entire game. On early turns in a mono green deck such as Bonnie, you don't really have things to do because you're mostly setting up for your late game. And in this early game, where you have some extra floating dong thanks to things like Cavendish or just being able to fill out your dong with blockers, you have the extra dong to use this card and just find any card that you want. Being 4 or higher actually just basically means you can search almost anything. 4 is really low cost. 4 cost is basically most of a deck when you think about it. It just means that you can't search events for the most part. But if you thought this was all, think again. They printed this card for every single color. Every single color is getting the exact same card for a different song, different opening from the TV show in celebration of the 25th anniversary of the TV show. Every single color can now have a card that can search a 4-cost or higher card. This also includes events. It means that someone like Hancock can now search things like Red Rock. It can search things like Gravity Blade. It can also search their top end, 6-cost Hancock, 10 costs. All of these cards now searchable off of 1 card. A lot of Red Shanks builds don't run the 1-cost Uta because they really rely on their top end, and their top end being Rayleigh, Roger. Now, all of these cards are searchable off of the 1 single card. And also consider that it doesn't have any sort of color restriction on the cards that you can pull, which means that if you are a dual color leader, you can technically run 8 of these cards to just be infinitely searching for top end. I don't think you'll end up ever putting in more than 4 of this card, as of course it still doesn't have counter itself and could get stuck in your hand. But still, in a deck like Red Purple Luffy, for example, you can also search for your top end. You can search for your things that ramp, because for example, 4-cost Banklei is 4-cost, which means that it's searchable. So many things are just so much more consistent, and just having all of these consistency cards, although it cannot search things that are lower than 4 costs, which is usually things like searchers or events, it just helps bring the general consistency of the game so much higher. It makes decks that don't have a certain archetype that they run so much better. And there's so many decks, for example, like Perona, who have a really strong base, but do not have the consistency to support things because they can't search things like Moria. You can search Moria now. Lucci can now search Moria. Black Yellow Luffy can now search Moria and all of their 5 costs with this card. And maybe the biggest winner from this card is Enel. Enel, although many people hate it, a lot of people also like the deck. Enel's top end is 8-cost Katakuri, 9-cost Yamato, 10-cost Ace. All of these cards now being searchable is really significant for the deck. It's a very strong deck as long as you can keep playing your top end. But as soon as you run out of top end, it can end up becoming weak. The other thing to note is that Raigo is searchable. Raigo being searchable means that you just have so much more consistency in the late game, and also because Raigo is only 6 costs, you can technically search on 1 turn when you don't have your big things to find your more big things, and also play Raigo on the same turn and still have 2 dong extra to play something like the 2-cost Shirahoshi. Before, Enel just didn't have something to do on their Raigo turn. They would always just play Raigo, maybe play a blocker, hit, and then pass. But because of this one event, Enel now has the consistency to play all of their top ends over and over again, find the Raigo more often, and just in general be the consistent, powerful control deck that it always was meant to be. So to recap, these cards don't just increase the consistency of the tier 1.5 to 2 decks, it actually increases the consistency of a lot of these lower tier decks that just couldn't break into the meta due to this consistency. Some people are going to freak out about these cards, saying it's going to be the end of fun because you're going to have Lucci slamming 2 or 3 Morias on you consistently. But actually, I think that this is very good for the game. At first glance, it may seem toxic because these stronger decks become stronger, but because these other decks that have suffered from consistency can now have a shot, it makes a very interesting meta Although I think this card's going to be very controversial because a lot of people are going to hate that they're going to now be having to deal with 2 or 3 Morios from Lucci now. You also have to think about this from the perspective of the mirror. Mirrors have always been very toxic, for example, in Enel or in Lucci, because it came down to usually who had the more top end. A lot of the times you can attribute your losses to, oh, he just had more Morios than me. He just had more 10 aces than me. But thanks to this card, it actually makes it a lot more of an even playing field now that they're searchable. So although the consistency of these decks goes up in general, it also means that the mirror is a lot more healthy and a lot more skill-based, and these other maybe tier 3 to 4 decks can maybe break into tier 2, maybe 1.5 with the right cards and combos in the future. Once again, thank you very much. Very lovely view from Shinjuku Station in Japan, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.